Do you know what it is that I love about vintage sewing patterns? I mean, other than the fantastic style, if it's been used, someone's cut it. I don't have to do the work. Also, sometimes you get a free gift. It's a pin. It's kind of rusty. Okay, I just realized that there's a pattern piece missing. And of course, it is the collar piece. Okay, I can explain a little bit more. So in the last couple of months, I somehow developed this drive and passion to draft my own bodice loafer, fit it to my body, and make a couple of designs with my own self-drafted sewing patterns, which was all super fun and nice, but I decided to give myself a little bit of a break, a little bit of a palette cleanser, and actually make something using a sewing pattern that I already have, specifically this vintage sewing pattern. But lo and behold, the collar pattern piece for this vintage sewing pattern is actually missing, which is super annoying because it's basically like the entire point of the design, if you can tell. So despite trying to avoid drafting a sewing pattern, in this video, I'm going to be showing you my process of drafting the collar pattern, sewing this cute retro dress, and hopefully end up with something that looks like this. To draft the big statement collar, I consulted my trusty Bunka Fashion College book and referenced the instructions for drafting a flat collar. Basically, I traced out the pattern pieces for the front and the back bodice, overlapped the ends of the shoulders by about quarter of the front shoulder length, then just grossly drew out the shape. When drawing the inner circumference of the collar, I followed the front neckline for the front of the collar, then started drawing about a centimeter away from the neckline as I started moving towards the back neckline. When drawing the outer circumference of the collar, I made the back of the collar 7.5 inches wide and the part going over the shoulders 7 inches wide. For my size, this turned out to be about 4 inches beyond the shoulders. So, I finished drafting the collar pattern piece yesterday. I feel like I'm still in kind of like a state of mini shock about the fact that the collar pattern piece is actually missing. Someone must have liked it so much and like, I'm just gonna take this collar pattern piece and I'll put it somewhere else instead. In any case, I have a pretty good feeling about this collar pattern piece, even though I have no idea if it's gonna end up looking exactly like it's meant to per the illustration on the pattern envelope. The overall shape of my drafted collar pattern looks pretty similar to the shape shown on the instructions of the sewing pattern, so I think it should be a pretty good copy of it. Other than the collar pattern piece, the front facing and the back facing pattern pieces are missing as well, but they're a lot more straightforward to draft and I don't have a lot of concerns about those pieces. At this stage, I have also adjusted the pattern piece to fit my bust and my waist circumference. I also shortened the length of the skirt. When it comes to sewing a vintage pattern or just any commercial pattern for that matter, bust, waist, and length are the top 3 things that I always have to adjust before even starting the project proper. Because the design that I'm sewing has sleeves, I tried my very best to avoid changing anything to the pattern pieces that would kind of alter the shape of the armhole because I don't want to change the sleeve pattern piece. I hate sleeves. And now it's time to cut the fabric. So LDH Scissors sent me the Midnight Edition gift set to try out, which I was super excited about because I've heard so many good things about their scissors. The Midnight Edition is a series of design that comes with this midnight anti-rust coating, which makes the scissors look so sexy. But of course, there's so much more to these scissors other than the way they look. The fabric shears are actually made of carbon steel, which is a tougher but lighter type of metal than regular stainless steel. In other words, these fabric shears will wear down at a much slower rate with every cut you make. I seriously love LDH Scissors for the range of quality product that they offer and their company mission. They're always finding ways to give back to the community at large, and so if you want your dollars to have a meaningful impact, definitely check out LDH Scissors. So the thing is, I like to take shortcuts when it comes to sewing. I like to take shortcuts and do things the easy way and try to save time as much as I can. But with all the number of years that I've been sewing, what I've learned is that the one step where you really can't take shortcuts on is marking your fabric pieces. So the collar has a sharp point on the ends and notch design somewhere around here. And to help me save time when I'm at the sewing table, I'm gonna make sure that I take time to mark out the stitch lines so I don't have to guess where I'm supposed to pivot and turn while I'm sewing. For me, when it comes to a sewing project, cutting always takes the longest, but the time that I spend making notches and marking out important stitch lines, they really translate to time that I end up saving when I'm at my sewing table. This is done and we're gonna start sewing the dress. Okay, that didn't cover the camera. As with most projects, I started with the smaller, more manageable parts of the dress first. I started off with batch pinning and batch sewing all the darts of the bodice and the skirt pieces. But as I started working on pinning the pleats on the skirt front, I developed a little bit of design dilemma. Decision time. I'm a little intrigued by the pleats on the front of the skirt. So according to the pattern, I'm supposed to have the pleats folded towards the center of the skirt front, but instinctively I feel like it should be folded away from it. And the reason is that when I have the pleats folded towards the center, I have the folds kind of popping out of my hips a little bit more, and it just gives the illusion of a rounder skirt front. But when I have the pleats folded away from the center, I have less of that visual effect. So I knew I had to put the front and back of the skirt together first, then try the skirt on myself before I could make a decision about the pleat. I feel like I kind of already made up my mind in my head, but I'm just gonna give it a go and just try it out. After you've seen the final look of the dress at the end of the video, you can leave a comment and let me know if I have made the right decision or not. So here is a side-by-side comparison. On the left, we have the skirt with the pleats going towards the center. And on the right, we have the pleats going away from the center. You see which direction I chose in a bit, but I'm curious to know, which one would you have chosen? Before I move on and do any more work, I want to talk a little bit about the seams. I usually finish my seams off with a regular basic zigzag stitch, but because this fabric is actually a really nice and sturdy woven fabric, I feel like it's basically a waste of time and resources for me to finish the raw edges off with zigzag stitches. So what I'm gonna do instead is finish them with my pinking shears. So I want to give you a little closer look and show you what it looks like. So this is the cut edge of the fabric. You can see that it's already starting to fray quite a bit. And I'm just going to trim the edge off with the pinking shears. Now this is the edge after it's been cut with the pinking shears. It's great, isn't it? I told you I love shortcuts. And with the skirt and the bodice of the dress mostly done, I could no longer procrastinate on the thing that I was a little fearful of, the collar. To sew the collar, I placed them right sides together and sewed all around the outer edge of the collar, pivoting around the notch design and following the markings I made at the start of the project. After that, I trimmed the seam allowance with my pinking shears and clipped the seam allowance around the notch. For the notch to turn out nice and sharp, I had to clip really close to the stitches. For a sharp design like this, it always takes a couple of tries to get it just right. And while I do that, please take a moment to hit the like button for this video if you're enjoying it so far. Now at this stage, I also decided to add something a little extra. Top stitching! I had this idea that I wanted it to be matchy-matchy with my brimless beret hat, which I made with the same navy cotton twill, and so I decided to add the same brown top stitching detail as the one I added to the hat. Look at that! I always love a good top stitching detail. It's coming together! Next, I pinned the wrong side of the collar to the right side of the bodice and stitched them together. Then I placed the right side of the facing and the right side of the collar together and stitched them in place. The original design of the pattern actually asks for 2 large 3-inch wide buttons, but I don't have a button of that size in the color and design that would go with the dress, so I decided to go with 6 smaller buttons with a nautical vibe. I think with the large sailor type collar and the navy colored fabric, this just seems like the most natural decision to me. Okay, I am so close to finishing the dress. The dress is now a single piece. I need to attach the sleeves and add the zipper. And after that, I will have to hem the dress and I will show you all the sweet details of the dress. Okay, people, I am in love with how this dress has turned out. The modifications that I made to the sewing pattern at the start of the project really helped me to fit this dress to my body a lot more perfectly in the way that I want it to. But if there is one thing that I would change about this dress, it is the bust height. I kind of had a suspicion that this could be an issue. Vintage sewing patterns from the 50s and the 60s tend to have a higher bust point because of the undergarments that people used to wear. Fortunately, the dark navy color of the fabric and the big collar design kind of hides that problem a little bit. So here's how the dress looks on the inside. There isn't a single thread along the raw edges. Everything is finished with pinking shears, and other than adding the top stitching detail around the collar, I also added it around the hem of the sleeves and the front of the bodice just to kind of pull the look together a little bit better, if you know what I mean. With this version of the dress made, I am kind of toying with the idea of making another one with the gathered skirt, and instead of the round collar, I think I will make it with a square collar now that I've kind of figured out the drafting process of this type of collar, and perhaps in a softer fabric, perhaps like a light blue chambray, to give more of like a romantic, adventure-seeking type of feel. But summer is just slowly slipping through my fingers, so it might just be an idea that I'm gonna shelve for the next year. If you are fearful of the cooler months like I am, and you want a cute hat like this beret hat to keep your head warm during the cooler months, then definitely check out my sewing pattern, the Orion hat, and the step-by-step sewing video tutorial to see how easy it is to put a hat like this together. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. If you are new, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in the next video for more sewing and DIY and my normal voice.